Great.
Right now. Hey, you guys, welcome to Straight Up Startups. Today is Tuesday, October 11th. We are here, like always, Tuesday night talking about being a founder, startup ideas, information, news in tech. And like always, I'm joined with my friend Nick Hughes. Nick, how you doing?
Hey, Connor, I'm doing really well, man. Just another
Awesome.
week.
Just another week. You do anything good this weekend?
You know, I watched a lot of football and I worked and watched a lot of football, so that's good. But yeah, I coming into a pretty busy rest of the year, so I took a little time last weekend, and then I actually ended up going and seeing some family, my sister and her kids, and always got to put in some time for the family as
Of
well.
course, of course. Where was that? Where did you travel to?
They live over in Silverdale, Washington, which is across the water from Seattle.
Yeah.
And yeah, so good to see them.
Awesome, awesome. And are you calling from WeWork today?
I'm in WeWork downtown in the Holyoke building. Yeah,
Building. Awesome. I know they've been real good to you.
yeah.
Cool. Well, let's jump into this week. To give you guys a little bit of preview, what we're talking about is we got some takeaways from Greg Gottsman, who's a leader here at Pioneer Square Labs, talking about what's your inevitable box from Nick's conversation with Clark Allen, and talking about Facebook and some of their new exploits this week. Talking about being a founder, what you think about some, if you could give yourself some old advice. But we'll get to those topics soon. For the first one, we're talking about Greg and Pioneer Square Labs. He had a conversation with Jasper Curia with TechCrunch, and just giving, and I kind of to give you guys an explanation if you're not familiar with Pioneer Square Labs, what their model is they have a studio model. So just their group of guys and entrepreneurs are constantly brainstorming new ideas. And what they do is they kind of set up like miniature startups and they test it out. They build a product and they test it out within the market. They try to find if something is going to work there, and then they run with it, or they shut it down and move on to something new. Kind of a different model in the VC firm and space, at least. And so, Nick, what were your takeaways from this article? And what do you think about what Pioneer Square Labs is doing? Do you think that this is a scalable and repeatable model for them?
Well, my takeaway. One of the interesting metrics in the article was it was something like, their model is they internally create ideas, they actually build initial versions or prototypes, actually get them in the user's hands, and they test them out. And if they meet certain growth metrics, they set forth KPIs, then they're actually it proceeds into, okay, let's work on this as a product and as a business. And it was literally like 95% shutdown rate. And so it was like 20 different ideas, something like that, and they shut down like 17 of them, and or like 21, something like that.
18 and 21, yeah.
Yeah, so like I think that jumped out to me that they are doing some interesting work around kind of validating the initial product and the market fit. So I think that that's cool and interesting. I don't think it's scalable. I think that there's some prerequisites to this thing, which is basically you have to have. So this spun out of Madrona Labs and Madrona Venture Capital here in Seattle, and they've got money, they have investors. They have then Pioneer Square Labs actually went and raised some capital. And so you have to have operating capital, you have to have money to invest, you then have to have a network to find the initial people to build it. And then when you choose to spin it out, you have to have the network to find the team that you actually put in place. So I think inevitably, I think it's an interesting model. I don't think it's scalable, and only time will tell to determine if they actually are at any better than any random VC in spinning out any companies.
Yeah, and I know we're going to talk about comparing VCs here a little later on. But yeah, I found it interesting what he had to say, and the model is just very intriguing because I know all these big VC firms do have entrepreneur in residence, right? So they have these what they would define as smart, intelligent, savvy entrepreneurs that come in and constantly are creating new ideas, testing things out, see if anything pops up. I knew things like Product Hunt came out of that same situation. And so there are some really good opportunities. I think it just really comes down to how good are your entrepreneurs, right? Are they creative and can they execute really well? And that's really going to determine how far they're going to be able to go because they're not stretching out and seeing kind of what total is out there. It's based off those few guys or girls who are producing all the all the different ideas.
Right. And I'll just step in and actually just kind of bring up a point that you might be able to add value to is one of the criticisms of their model, which I know Greg and I know a number of people at Pioneer Square Labs is, like, okay, depending on the ownership of the equity splits when this thing gets rolled out, are you going to find the right initial founding team that is now additional to what Pioneer Square Labs would own? And I don't know their numbers. I don't know the initial equity split, but I think it remains to be seen if you're going to find the highest quality founders that are willing to pour their blood, sweat, and tears into something that they were just found, like they were the team that they built around the initial product after it was initially built, which I just don't know. So I think that remains to be seen.
You make a great point with the whole passion, right? Some of these things that you can't teach, that no education is going to be able to prepare you for, but the willingness to wake up every day and grind and believe in the product, and kind of have that vision, is a big factor that you might not get out of something like this, because it's just crank out idea. And if you got 20 ideas, it's really hard to focus. So it's really interesting. I do know Spare 5, you had them on Feature Friday. Wow, that was at least a year ago now. Mm-hmm. But I know they raised a lot of money out there. So I assume that they're the big ones that are really holding this up. And if they have 1 out of 30, then maybe that's a success, and they can be, really create something bigger from there. But I do feel like they need to kind of maybe they have their hands out in Seattle more than I actually know, but I feel like they need to kind of branch out and find some more of those thought leaders and thinkers to really be getting a high volume of ideas coming through.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, so we're going to progress here and move on to this next topic is around, we're going to call it the inevitable box. In the background here, if you're listening, go on to Founders Live. I actually spoke with Clark Allen, who he's an entrepreneur and an author. He just spent more than 5 years writing and then getting his first book published. It's called The Inevitable Box. And his thesis is basically, we as entrepreneurs create this, what you would call an inevitable box that we fall into, and that could be different things. It could be psychological, it could be physical from the point of just driving yourself unhealthy. But he found himself in a pretty big hole. That when the economy fell about 10 years ago. 2007, 8, 9, that was like, he pretty much lost his business and he had to build it back up. But he found that he was very, very, very deep in what he called an inevitable box, and this was his process of working out of it. And so I think the question here is, what is your inevitable box, and although you maybe haven't read the book, what does that mean to you, and how do we as founders actually build these weird barriers and put ourselves in these boxes that it's hard to get out of?
Well, first, the part that struck me kind of the most, where I really probably missed the next 2 minutes of talking because I was thinking about what he said, was that when you're a founder or an entrepreneur, yes, you're starting your company, but it's more, instead of a journey of your company, it's actually a journey in learning about yourself. That true reflection, because in the end, the company's going to be gone, whether it's one day, 10 years, 100 years from now, or it's going to move on without you, right? Maybe there's going to be new leadership come in, and then it won't be your project anymore. But yourself is always going to be there. And that really struck a chord with me, and I think that's a lot what he learned while starting to go through the reflection about what do I need to teach in this book is, this wasn't about me learning necessarily completely about how to run a good company and be successful. Is actually what's successful to me. How do I make myself feel happy and bring joy and pass on that knowledge to other people? And that's kind of where he's transitioned within his professional career. And that's something that I've really been trying to work on, really appreciate the journey and learn about the experience and remember that, yes, I'm passionate about all these things that I'm working on right now, but that's just a small piece. And internally, the process that I'm going through and the self-reflection that I need to have with myself every day, week, month is actually the most important part. And so for me, I know my inevitable box, and I know you've seen this with a lot of my sales, is like, because of my passion, I go through ups and downs, right? I take no's really hardly. And in sales, you get a lot of no's, right? And I take it personally, too personally. And I know that's going to be my box probably for my entire career, is kind of learning to get outside of taking the no's too hard and kind of getting down on myself, which I think really connects to the reflection and the personal journey and understanding the bigger picture versus, the one simple no I got from some silly client.
Yeah, it's, he asked me afterwards, and he's like, what does it mean to you? And, my response, which, by the way, incredible conversation. I really enjoyed chatting with Clark. He's an awesome guy. This will not be the last time we talk and, do some things, which is really cool. But, my reflection was, excuse me, the inevitable box, I think the word is inevitable there, is as you go through this process, it's almost by default, there's things that you either knowingly do or not know that you do or think, that put you in the space, in a place that actually, if not paid attention to, can really, really, really affect and hurt you as a founder. And we've talked before, some depression stuff in terms of this is just, it happens to certain founders. And so I think what he's writing is, he said, this is what I experienced. And it was a lot of like selfishness. It was like being way too focused on, external things, money, kind of being all about himself. And that's the inevitable box that I've sensed that, if not aware of, we can really stumble. And so I think Clark has done an incredible service to put out this book to say, hey, entrepreneurship is one of the greatest things in the world, but here's what you should pay attention to as you go through your process. And, so I actually, the story's crazy, but he actually reached out to me. I didn't know who he was. He asked me to read the manuscript and then literally write the forward. And I was like, holy crap. And it was a very humbling experience. And I just tried to put words to, this is a psychological roller coaster. You got to know what you're going to get into. And Clark Wright does a good job of illustrating that, and then going through his process of how he climbed out of it. Mm-hmm. And then actually identified, oh, the box is always going to be there. Here's how I deal with it. I would encourage everyone to, you got to look that book up. There's a link on it, Founders Live. Buy it. It's a great book, and then give it to a friend, because they're going to need it too.
Yeah, he takes a perspective that's very different than a lot of the how-to entrepreneur books, and that's what I like. He really focuses on the internal side, right? The emotional side that you got to deal with yourself, and that's what really appealed to me. I haven't read the book yet, but I listened to the podcast, and he convinced me to take a look at it. And so I want to know, on a side note, was this before or after your book?
Oh, this was way after.
This was after your book,
yeah. So, I had a really interesting, I just basically compiled a ton of blog posts together. That happened a couple of years ago. And then right about a year ago, I got some random email, and, it was like, I had to look this guy up and just kind of check out, make sure it was all good. But he reached out to me, and then we started down this process. And yeah, I wrote it probably in January or February, and it took this long for it to get posted. So,
wow. Yeah. Wow. Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. The last point I wanted to make that I found that it was interesting, and we've talked about this a lot, is he's writing this book, right? And he's going and he wants to share all this information, and then he finishes the book, and then there's all this other work to do. Right? Oh, yeah. He's got to get around all the publishers and deal with that big political mess. He's got to market it. Now he's got to go on tour, right? And he's got to give speeches. He's got to go do the college tour and go shake hands and do seminars now. And it's kind of turned into a whole nother business just to get his book out there. It's been a very interesting journey, and I think he's learned even more lessons, kind of seeing how he had to pivot his career just to support this book that he wrote. I don't think he expected that in the beginning.
Nope.
So next up, what we got is on October 9th, so I guess it was on Sunday, Fred Wilson came out with a post. It's called The Hard Raise. And the example that he uses is in 2003 with him and Brad Burnham. They went out to raise $100 million of early stage capital to start this new fund. And he talked about how it took them almost 9 months and traveling the world along with it to really get this to come together. And so he just talks about the different journey and how there are some companies out there, like the Ubers, not even the Airbnbs, but Uber specifically, that people just jump on and it's going to blow up, right? But there's other ones that take a lot more of a growing process and how you got to evaluate those. And so, Nick, my question for you, what did you take from his lessons of the hard raise, and what would you suggest founders to do to get through those tough fundraising times like most people are in?
Well, the first take was, although this was more than 10 years ago, people like even Fred Wilson have challenges, raising money, and we're talking about a different subset of investors. These are LPs or larger entities that are looking to invest in VC firms, and this was 2003, so clearly there was a huge dip. And it was probably a challenging time to raise money. But in the end, people like even Fred Wilson struggle with this. And I think his point is that even through the hard raise, one, you learn more about those founders or yourself if you're the individual going through it. If it's a difficult process, you're going to learn a lot about how dedicated you are. You go through 100 pitches. I mean, you learn so much when you repeat 2 to 3 pitches a day, maybe. There is so much, you get so much feedback, and just watching how the individuals respond, listening to their questions, and then tightening up your pitch. So you just learn a ton. And you also figure out that you are you're looking for the select few, and sometimes you have to rummage through 100. Like we talked about this a couple weeks ago, you have to rummage through. And so I like, this is the writing that I love. This is why we do Founders Live, and we highlight people like this because they're talking about it's freaking hard. And he's not saying it took us 1 month to raise $100 million. He said it took us 9 months. And I really appreciate that he's pushing these sort of things out. I'm wondering what spurred this article, but I think it's great that he's pushing out this sort of content.
Yeah, I think it's great too. I mean, yeah, $100 million is numbers that I can't even imagine, honestly. And doing business and trying to find those people, I'm not at that level to even comprehend being able to do business like that. But yeah, you can definitely apply it to so many principles of being a founder or being an entrepreneur, about going through the grind and the hustle. And I really like how he ended it with, that's what makes you stronger. No matter if it goes poorly or it goes great and you finish the $100 million in a month, that you're going to grow throughout that process no matter what. And that's going to make you a stronger founder, win or lose. And I think that's always something really important. I think that it's mentioned in one of the other articles today, but just talking about failure, right? And failure is only failure if you don't learn anything, right? And if you can bounce back, that makes the failure okay, by really kind of rebounding and learning from that and making sure that you don't make those mistakes again and you evolve. That's what makes you a great founder, a great entrepreneur. It's not necessarily because you didn't raise the right money. Exactly.
Speaking of, the next topic, and this, these next two topics seem to be something that bubbles up every couple weeks now with us. But there was a great article written by an individual on Media. It was a Medium post about how to thrive in the millennial economy, and he was really just writing about how things have really changed, and the characteristics and what not only millennials look to have in a professional world, but also what certain employers are looking for in the millennials, or at least the younger demographic. So what did you take from that article, and what did you see similarities in terms of your life?
First, after I read it, I thought it was kind of weird that it was called the Millennial Economy.
Right.
Because I think mostly millennials are just trying to jump on the wave, right? And it was actually a bunch of the previous generations that really started this, and are probably the ones taking the most advantage of it. They're the ones who are out traveling the world, doing the blogs. Obviously, there are plenty of millennials that are doing it, but it's still kind of a learning process. But it is going to be the future of all these new millennials, especially the ones in college right now, and how they're going to perceive the jobs and kind of pursue their careers coming out of college, which is going to be very different. I think I was kind of like right on that cusp where everything was coming out 5 years ago. One part that I really, just in general, I know we talk about empathy a lot and having a high EQ, a high emotional quotient, and just knowing what it's like to walk in other people's shoes, how important that is. I've really appreciated how much that's been pressed upon just business people in general, but specifically entrepreneurs, because when you're leading, it's so important to have that empathy towards whether it's the people you're leading or your customers or your users in any situation. And so that's really important. But yeah, everything is freelance. You and I know that very well. You and I both do freelance gigs all the time. It provides us more flexibility. But I think this comes from kind of my view on society is I was told a lot, like, you can do anything, right? Do what you love, do what you love. And I think that's a little too extreme. But before, I know my parents kind of got the opposite information from my grandparents, was like, you know, you got to go to school and then you get a job and you support your family and you stick with your job for 30 years and then you retire and that kind of traditional path. And then that was taken complete opposite. And now I think we're trying to find a better medium, but I think also it's just a timing thing with all these different companies, the expansion of the internet and the access to all these different tools. It's just kind of a timing thing that's made this gig economy, plus travel's a lot cheaper, easier. Everywhere's got internet access now. So it's just kind of, it's a natural ebb and flow. But yeah, I mean, this is exactly the life that I want to live as a millennial. I want to be able to travel the world. I want to be able to work on my own schedule, choose the projects that I want to do, and run my own companies, obviously. And so I really like it. I think it's the future, and it's true. If you don't catch up, like, you're not going to die, but I think you're going to really fall behind. And if you're running a company and you can't grasp the fact that there are 1 billion plus employees out there around the world, and if you don't let them work remotely, then you're really limiting your talent pool. That's something really, that's a big decision to part with. And just that in general is a big thing that I think a lot of these new companies are embracing that a lot more.
Yeah. He was. I really enjoy. I actually liked the post. I'm possibly going to get in touch with him on a few things, which is cool. But he's coming from. He's basically living it. He's traveling the world. He's writing. He's running his company. If I remember correctly, it's basically a staffing and recruiting agency. I think that's what it was. And he's showing and proving that in today's world, you really just need to be connected to earn a living and build a company. You just got to be connected in any digital form. Yeah. And I love that. And, I think I know that you want to go do that. And I'm half of me is looking at doing that. Half of me is, there's times if you're going to build a company and you're going to build something, sometimes you got to be in a physical space. Yeah. Depending on the exact company and what the requirements are. But I totally agree. And, embracing certain aspects of that, I think part of the lessons are, you do have to, it can't just be this year-long, vacation. Also, I think another huge topic is how our world figures out the gig economy, or the contractors. That's another issue. And when you are living that life and basically contracted, or having a unique situation where you're basically a 1099 contractor, that can, if you as a person doing that, if you don't stay on top of that could really burn you in the end. So there's still some things that need to get worked out. But man, totally agree. I think it's awesome. He's proving it, and he's helping people actually go live freely and also add value to the world and earn money. And if I was 20 years old, I would definitely be doing that.
Yeah, and that's a good transition. Before we get to that, you're kind of talking about the contract and how big that is. If any of you out there listening are a contractor or a freelancer, and you've had any issues, or you think you're going to have issues with contracts, check out hellobonsai.com. They're kind of the most innovative company out there right now. They're a YC company, or they just came out of YC. And what they do is they make it really easy to create a contract between you and your employer. And they just rolled out a new service that they actually maintain the payments too. So the company puts that money into the account beforehand, and then once they approve that you've done the job, it gets put into automatic deposit into your bank account. I really think highly of these guys. Obviously, I know one of the co-founders, and working personally with freelancing, I highly recommend it. It will bring a lot of peace to any of your contracting work you're doing. But talking about your 20-year-old self, so that's a good transition. Startup Grind, one of their contributors, Nick, I'm gonna mess his name up. Nick H. Let's call him Nick H. He wrote a post called "Advice for my 30-year-old," or from 30-year-old me to 20-year-old me. And I know we kind of talked about this last week, but I want to dive into it more because it's always good to reflect. And so what Nick says is, first one, he has 11 topics. First one is to travel more. 2 is just build things. 3 is to read every day. 4, stop watching television. 5, don't take the corporate job. 6 is trust everyone until they can't be trusted anymore. 7 is connecting with people. 8 is valuing your time. Also related to last week, valuing other people's time and understanding how important that is. 9 is fail, which is a very big buzzword in tech startups, but it's very important. 10 is evaluating your success, and 11 is learning to have patience. And so, Nick, is there anything here that really sticks out to you that you want to highlight, or do you have some other advice that you'd give your 20-year-old self?
Oh, they're all great, man. Like this is a great article, and I think he's spot on with a lot of what he mentions. I would say the 2 that jumped out at me, I think build and fail, in the sense that build, just get creative and build stuff, and some things are going to be side projects, some things aren't going to turn out to even be a thing to use. But if I was going to tell my 20-year-old self, I would say you just start tinkering early, and you're giving yourself more opportunities to stumble upon or find a solution to a problem in the world. And the earlier you do that, the more opportunity you have to actually create something really big, if that's what you want. And I think it probably came to me at about 28 to 30. So not even 10 years ago, well, maybe like 25, 27, but definitely not at 20 was I tinkering and building. And building can be like writing code, to creating something like Founders Live, to actually writing. I think writing is building in its own way, whether it's thoughts, content, brand. Build, just do stuff. And the more you do, the more you learn, the more you expose what you've created to other people. And then fail is just kind of, we don't need to spend too much time on that, but clearly it goes along with it, and you just get more opportunities to find the right combination. So I think those 2, and there was a lot of others, man, but those 2, I think I would tell my 20-year-old self to get going, try stuff, and I'm building fun, cool products right now, but if it was 10 years ago, I would have made up a lot more time.
Yeah, I wish I conceptualized the concept of build more when I was younger, especially when I was in college. I think I was doing those things, but I wasn't really proactively thinking like, oh, I should go out and be trying to create these different things, and how that can spin off into businesses and ideas and create a future opportunity for yourself. I wish I was more conscious of that. The things that I have definitely learned, and I don't necessarily would tell myself because I think I took advantage of it, but from my own personal experience, travel has been the number one thing that makes me who I am. I've been to India, Thailand, South America. Well, I've been all around the world. So that has really influenced me in my entrepreneur experience because I have a better understanding of what else is out there. But also I'm extremely inspired. I think we talk about how our country is so entrepreneurial. I think the Asian countries are far more entrepreneurial than we are. A lot of the Asian immigrants that come over here, like starting a business is like what they're doing when they're coming here, and they already have businesses that they've started. I think in Asia, the concept of having your own business is very, very well established there compared to, I think it's still a newer concept here in America. And so I really learned some lessons about entrepreneurship and hustle, and whether it's running a cart out your back door or running a giant conglomerate, there's different ways to run a business and be successful and create a lifestyle for yourself. The other thing was relating to read more. Right around like 21 was when I started to read more. I wish I knew that way earlier. than 21. It's just really opened up my mind, helped me be creative. I think that's really important to remain creative and kind of keep those juices going. And that's the big reasons why I choose to read every single day. And last one is just people, right? Value the people that are in your life, value their time, understand that they have different experience, be empathetic of them, and try to consume as much and learn as much from every single person that you can, whether they're in your life for a short amount of time or a long time. There's very valuable tidbits from every single person out there.
Absolutely, dude. You touched on a lot of great ones, and I could only pull out two, but there's a lot there that were incredibly valuable and definitely good advice. Our next topic, we're totally changing subjects here and flipping over, but interesting article on the title of the blog is Musings on Markets, and the question here is, how do investors price or value early stage companies? And just a little background here, when, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the venture capital industry is kind of an opaque, kind of just very foggy industry in terms of value. The companies, when an investor puts in money, the valuation to that company and what amount of equity they are gaining for that is so subjective. And so, excuse me. So what happens is, when you look at the backstory here, is the value or the perceived returns to a VC portfolio. So a specific fund that has been the capital has been put to work. The resulting value at any point in time is totally random in a way, based on what this individual is talking about is the price or the value that they've put on that specific company at that specific time, the companies that haven't even actually seen an exit yet. So, Connor, I know this could be over your head. It's definitely, I'm trying to stay afloat here and dive in, but it's good to study this stuff. What did you take from this in terms of how we value early stage companies, and how do you go about thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a difficult read. It definitely was a little bit of a snoozer for me. But what I took out of it that I thought was really interesting is about how do the VCs beat the market, right, and the public traders, which I think is really interesting, without all the data, right? Because the guys who are trading on the public markets have all the information in the world, incredible algorithms doing prediction and everything, but how do they still beat them? Which I think's interesting, but what I took out of it is it comes down to what the VCs actually get to contribute that the investors in public markets don't get to do. If they put their money in, they get to massage that investment, right? They have all these resources that they can contribute to actually rise the tide. And whether it's help the entrepreneur, bring in accountants, bring in extra engineers, they have access to talent. They just have a lot more resources to grow it. And I think they also have more stringent selection as well, because of the way that startups approach them and pitch, and they get to fully vet them, and they kind of do get to take a little bit more time than public markets. I think that's a big advantage that why VCs can kind of have the leg up on the public markets. But yeah, a lot of the value stuff was a little bit confusing to me, just because it was a lot of keywords kind of being bounced back and forth between valuations and pricing and all of that. But I'm interested to see what you thought, Nick.
Well, yeah, so the great thing about these sort of articles and stuff that we occasionally put on Founders Live is this is important as a founder. The more you can wrap your head around the way the VC industry works, or the way so this is one option of financing your company. Knowing the industry and how it operates and how they actually perceive your company and how they price it or value it is important. And so those are good things to dive into. I know it's dry and it's tough, but the more you read, the more you start to understand it. My perspective is this, that to sum it up incredibly quickly, the way that early stage investors, venture capitalists, price early stage companies or mid-stage companies, there is literally no one way. And that's the tough part. It depends on the public markets. It depends on how hot or how cold the funding market is for early stage companies. He listed off a couple different the aspects and the ways that they actually price. So the whole point here is they actually price a company based on a few different variables. One would be looking at, the previous pricing round. If they've raised money before, what was the price of that? There's faults on that. They look at similar companies in the same space that have recently raised money. There's faults on that. They look at public companies in the same space, and then they basically kind of backtrack, and there's faults on that. And then they look at essentially, metrics and numbers and revenue, and they look at the projections. If you do a financial model when you're raising money, they look at those like, oh wow, so in 5 years they say they're going to be at this revenue level, at this, and so there's faults on that. And so in the end, basically putting a price on an early stage company that hasn't proven tremendous hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars of value, it's a guessing game. They're literally just like putting their finger in the air. And I think, I'm being very simplistic in this explanation, but the point is that it's so there's random perspectives that other people can have on a company. So that's why I think, these sort of things help me further understand how that industry works and how those investors are thinking about things. But in the end, I think it's not a science and it's not an art. It's a mix of both, and it's hard to determine. It shifts and changes as the markets shift and change. But I think as a founder, you should fully understand how it could shift and change, and why an investor would either price your company when they're looking at it high or low, or in the middle. So these are the things that I would encourage founders to look at. So just to finish real quick, so you dissect the article and basically say, okay, I need to look at certain companies that are similar to me and what they've raised recently. I need to look at public companies that are in our space that are 10 years ahead of us or 5 years ahead of us, and where are they at, and backtrack from their revenue multiples. These are the things you look at when you're looking to raise money.
Yeah, I find it really interesting because and kind of going back a little bit to Fred Wilson, is the companies that really pop are the new novel ones, that they have competitors, but a lot of times they're really disruptive, and sometimes it's hard to see what the true competition is up front, which is really interesting, right? Because they're going to value your company like Lyft, right? Even though Lyft is exactly like Uber, they're going, oh, Uber's doing this and they're doing 2.5, so we're going to do 2.5 less, which is really interesting. But yeah, it's just a guessing game. And I guess the one thing that is most important here is, who are your competitors, right? And what are the other people in your space that are trying to buy the time and dollars from all of the same customers? What are they doing? And that's kind of, okay, that sets the market rate, right? This is how many possible customers are out here. This is what we can do in revenue. And if you're really trying to break the mold, then you just got to take the hit, right? If you're going to do something revolutionary, you got to believe in it, and you're going to give up a little bit more based off someone else's valuation. But if you really believe in it, you'll get over that hurdle.
Absolutely. Hey, so I know we've got 2 more points here, and I actually want to jump to there's one. It's called actually the title of the article was basically lessons learned from hearing 20,000 pitches. This woman is a investor, and she's a part of 500 startups. Her name's Elizabeth Yin. We've talked about some of her articles previously, and I think it's interesting that she's wrapping in 20,000 based on all the email pitches that she sees and hears. But she wrote a very interesting article on some of the things that she's noticed and lessons that she can pull out to provide to other founders. And as you read that, what did you pull out of that article that you felt was really the most important lesson that she told for other founders to think about?
The one that I noticed the most was definitely relating to the emails versus referrals. And she talks about how they're one and the same to her. Because a lot of times, yes, there might be some famous investor or successful entrepreneur that's giving you a referral, and referrals are great when it comes to that, because they're inbound leads, but you never know really why they're coming to you, right? Sometimes it's, there really is some connection that makes the two work really well, but there's so many times where that founder owes their best friend a favor, or that investor needs to make that introduction, to help raise the round, or there's a lot of political business reasons why you get referrals, not necessarily connected to this is the best match for you. And I thought that was really interesting. I haven't seen a lot of people be transparent, because word of mouth and referrals are the number one ways to do business pretty much in every other industry. And so to hear her say like that doesn't mean a lot to me because I see so many, I'm really glad that she said that, because it stuck out to me.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that, but I think that's a really good point. What jumped out to me was, her first point was basically, look, ideas are a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
Everyone has all these ideas, and her truth is, look, if you're a founder and you have this thing you're working on and you want to pitch it to an investor, just know that idea is not very unique. Like, hey, it is what it is, right? Yeah. And her suggestion is, it's not the idea. Point out why you're unique. What is it about you that you have this idea that a lot of people have? What it is about you and your team? Have you discovered why are you guys unique? What have you built thus far that makes you differentiated to, towards like any others that are in the market that are pitching her with the same idea? They might get 5 or 10 different, they might get 5 or 10 same pitches from 10 different people. What's going to make you stand out? And that's huge. And I've been around the block enough to know, not only like me pitching even email or in-person investors, but also I receive pitches now in certain reasons, and whether that's for the Feature Friday event that I have, or people want to get my perspective. And I totally agree with her that you really have to, in that initial 3 to 4 sentences, if not less, really make it easy to understand what the concept is, but also easy to pick out, holy crap, these guys or these women or this team is really different and unique, and there's something about them I need to really follow up. Because the point, here's the second one, pushing a slide deck or whatever visual you're going to send on that we're talking about a cold email pitch. The whole purpose is to pique their interest and get them to follow up with another meeting, not to write a check. And so I think that is the biggest lesson that I pulled out of it, was how do you differentiate yourself from all the other people that are pitching the same idea, and how do you pique their interest enough to get them on the phone or in person?
Yeah, finding where you add value that everyone else doesn't. I like how she kind of gave the example. It was a vague example, but talked about I'm totally blanking on the type of company that it was. But either way, whatever it was, she really came out and said, like, this is why we're different. These are what the other people aren't doing. And that's why, we're more investable, or why you should take a chance on us. I thought that was really great. But yeah, it comes back to, really quickly presenting yourself, showing how you're different, and how you can bring value, which I thought was great. So for the last topic, we're going to be talking about Facebook, right? I mean, they seem to make news every single week now, right? When you got that many billions of dollars, you could be making a lot of products at once. But a lot of people definitely wrote about what was coming on. But I know we quoted here a GeekWire article, but everyone and their mom's written about it so far. But they're coming out with like their enterprise product, right? So this is a way for enterprise or companies to have their own internal Facebook for people to collaborate on. And so, Nick, what do you think? Is this a yes? Is this a no? Do you think this has potential? They're going after Slack. They're going after Google. Where does this Facebook enterprise fit within the market?
Yeah, I'm on the doubt fence for sure. I think, first of all, like, we're talking about a platform and a product or a company that we, or a lot of people, associate with outside the work. They're on it all the time outside of work, and now you you create something that you're forcing them or wanting them to use during their work. I just feel like it doesn't fit the way that we silo certain products in our mind and the way we use them. Secondly, I just look, it is a big market. They are going after Slack. I think they see that how valuable the market is, and Slack is growing, multi-billion-dollar company, and yet probably has, I'm guessing, 2%, 1% market share.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a huge land grab for the next evolution of what team and office, work communications.
Yeah.
So I think I don't blame them for going after it when you have that much, you have enough capital, and they do need to expand their market reach. But I don't think I would use it. I wouldn't put my team onto it. I just, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I feel the same way, but I think there are a ton of advantages. It is when it comes to Slack, right? Slack, as big as it is, and what you said about it having such a small market share, there are a lot of people who have no clue that run really big companies at how you can streamline your communication, because everyone's still stuck on email. And that's the other thing. I'm really interested to see how this is going to start affecting email. I use Gmail quite a bit, but internally I do use GChat a ton. And Slack's kind of taken over GChat a bit as well. But I do think there's a huge opportunity for companies to take advantage of this, because no one has really taken the social aspect of these communication platforms and kind of taken it to the next level. Right. And I think the acquisition of LinkedIn, which I have mixed reviews about also, could be an interesting connection on how you can kind of bring this all together within the company. But what Slack's just on the verge of it, but Google hasn't really done, and kind of any of these others, especially LinkedIn, they haven't created that social environment that is inviting and people contribute, and they talk about things that are work related and not work related. I think that's really where the potential is. And if you're an employer and your companies, all your employees are already on Facebook wasting their time. So this might be a good way to mitigate that a little bit, because it's really hard to prevent them from going on Facebook. So now you're saying, hey, go on Facebook, but go talk to your employees, right? If there's a company happy hour, we post it on the group page so everyone knows, like, this is where we're going. This is how it works. And I think with collaboration, there's some opportunities with the way the tools are designed that they can just put people in the groups really easily. And I think just because Facebook has the scale and the notoriety, that some of the big companies are really going to take advantage of it. And it's an easy transition for so many big companies to do, opposed to Slack, which is something new. And, I mean, it's not very difficult, but it is just something different, right? Where Facebook, top to bottom, everyone's going to get it right away. It's very simple. And so that's why I think they have a chance at going at this. And yeah, I bet Google and Slack are a little worried, because they just have connection to so many people that I think they can just make it work because they have a billion people.
Yeah. Look, they're definitely starting their race with a little head start. I'll say that much for sure. And it remains to be seen. I've read a few things where they clearly have a lot to think about with security, and we're talking about enterprise level usage, security, all that stuff, that whether they have it or not, and the consumer product is a question, but that's tremendously different than what they've done for the last 10 or 15 years. So I don't know, man. I'm just kind of I'm that siloed person, I guess, where it's like, okay, if you have your social platforms and apps that you use outside of work and with friends and family, I don't think that I have a hard time believing that Facebook's going to be equally a consumer brand, and oh, by the way, we're one of the biggest enterprise platforms as well. I just I don't know, but yeah, go ahead.
I mean, email's got to change, right? There's no way that email sticks it out for another 20 years on being the same, especially with all these new communication platforms. And so that's where I think they really had the chance to start making workplace changes, is evolving, kind of getting the mainstream companies to evolve from constantly using email, right? Like, email shouldn't be a conversation. right? It or shouldn't be a collaboration where you go back and forth. It just takes way too long. That's why Slack's been so successful, is because it's instant. And I think they can really do a good job getting the mass market of companies kind of transition into that. And then it'll be really interesting what happens with email, because I don't think email is going anywhere, but it's definitely going to change on how people use it.
Totally.
Cool. Well, that's it. That's what we got here for Straight Up Startups. We'll see you next week on Tuesday, October 17th. Thanks a lot, Nick. You got any last shout outs for us?
Nope. Just enjoy the fall weather wherever you are, and it's going to get cold here soon.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Nick. We'll see you next week.
See you.